Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue made a big change this week, dismissing Graham Harrell as the offensive coordinator. Now, the Boilermakers will look a little different as they prepare to try and snap the 17-game losing skid to Wisconsin. After a few final thoughts from the Nebraska loss upon rewatch, I'll discuss the coordinator change and what it means for the program. Then, I'll preview Saturday's game in Camp Randall Stadium before answering your questions about the Boilermakers. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. I'll be tweeting there all week and all throughout Saturday's matchup in Madison. Be sure to come join the conversation. You can always send in questions for the show there on Twitter at BoilersBeyond or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss a thing. As always, I rewatched Purdue's 28-10 loss to Nebraska. It was not the prettiest rewatch. I do not love Peacock's fast-forwarding and rewinding features, so it was not the most fun, but I did it. I have a few final thoughts from that game that maybe I didn't fully get to on Sunday, or maybe things that stood out. Purdue did a little more zone defense than it normally does. It played less man. You saw Purdue rush 3 and drop 8 more than I can remember it doing under Ryan Walters, really. And it helped when the field condensed on Nebraska in the first half. You would see Nebraska get across the 40-yard line or so, and its drive stalled out. Nebraska went to the half with 0 points, and it's not like it wasn't in position. Now, the 3 missed field goals, 2 were blocked. That certainly contributes, and that's the biggest part of it. But Purdue did do a nice job of getting things condensed, making Dylan Raiola have to make a decision about throwing the ball into a tight window or kind of eating the play. And at times he took a sack on that or just had to throw it away because I don't think Nebraska wants him throwing into tight windows. So it was effective once the field condensed. But when the field was more open, you saw Purdue do this a couple of times when Nebraska was in its own territory. Raiola picked Purdue's defense apart then. The holes were big enough that he was able to find open guys pretty easily, created some chunk plays there. I think I left the rewatch. Purdue's defense only gave up 21 points because 7 came off the pick 6. But I don't think it was a gigantic step forward for Purdue's defense. Nebraska did not run the ball as well as the last 2 opponents did against Purdue. Then again, Purdue gave up 700 yards on the ground in 2 games. It's hard to match that. Purdue still really struggled to adjust to the jet sweep or wide receiver reverse actions. On the 3rd play of the game, Nebraska hits a double reverse for a gain of 30 where Purdue was just completely out of position on. These are things, until Purdue shows that it can stop it, it's not gonna stop. Nebraska's leading rusher was a wide receiver. That tells you all you need to know about Purdue stopping some of that stuff, and it just has not happened yet. I would expect Wisconsin to try that this week, even though Wisconsin doesn't have a single wide receiver who's had a rushing attempt this year. I think, too, in the second half, Nebraska's drives were really time-consuming. Nebraska took a lot off the clock, and that kind of contributed to Purdue's defense wearing down. Nebraska was able to crack the defense and get into the end zone. It was a step forward for the defense, but it wasn't a huge one. It was progress, but it wasn't anything crazy. I do think, when Hudson Card has some time to work with, he's a pretty good passer. He made a few nice throws. A back shoulder one to Jerron Tibbs early on. One down the middle to Max Clare that Clare couldn't hang on to. And then on the next drive, one down the west sideline to Max Clare that was perfect. He just doesn't have a lot of time to work with. There are a lot of instances where, rewatching it, Purdue is getting blown up in the middle, or Purdue's getting blown up on the edges, and he just has to get the ball out quicker than he would like to. And that's including 5 sacks he took, most of which aren't really on him. There's a time or two where he probably needs to get rid of the ball and eats a sack, but for the most part, he doesn't have a lot of time to work with. And sometimes when he does, there's not a lot available downfield. There just really isn't. This is a pretty limited offense. And just upon a rewatch, this game was not as close as the scoreboard indicated. Nebraska was definitively the better team. Going into Purdue's final drive, when it went 75 yards for a touchdown, before that, Purdue had more penalty yards than offensive yards. Purdue had really gotten bailed out by Nebraska's offensive woes in the first half, by Nebraska's kicking game woes, by some times where Nebraska took itself out of field position, and that kept Purdue in it for a while. But the final stats tell you what you need to know. Nebraska won this game pretty comfortably. And because of that, Purdue decided to make a move at offensive coordinator on Sunday. When Graham Harrell was dismissed, early on Sunday evening, it started to get public, maybe mid-Sunday evening. I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, but the outcome was becoming inevitable. My thought, and I had told this to a couple people on Sunday morning, was I bet it happens at the bye week. Purdue has 3 more games, Wisconsin, Illinois, Oregon, and then a bye week. That's kind of when I thought it would take place, just because you have that extra week built in. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Purdue had to do something to try and spark some life into this season, because the last 3 weeks have just been soul-crushing. The optimism going into the Notre Dame game was really high. Fans were very excited. And now, 2.5 weeks later, bad at math here, Purdue doesn't have much life left. The fan base isn't all that excited. The conversation has turned very negative. And while firing Graham Harrell doesn't change a whole lot, you still have at least shown that you're willing to do something to try and get this season back on track. This is more of a cosmetic move than it is some season-altering move, if you ask me. It's not like you can change things drastically in the middle of the season. You've spent 2 years for the most part, from like January of 2023 to now, operating with Graham Harrell as your offensive coordinator, practicing with Graham Harrell as your offensive coordinator. You're not going to drastically change the playbook. You're not going to drastically change the scheme. It's not like Purdue's going to come out on Saturday in a wishbone offense or something. You're going to have the same general concepts of what you're going to do on offense. Because of that, it's not like you're going to see drastic changes. You just aren't. You also have the same personnel. And it reminds me of a quote I've always heard from my dad at a young age. You can't fire the players in college football, so you fire coaches. While Purdue's personnel is not entirely to blame, Purdue's scheme wasn't doing it any favors, you have the same players. You aren't going to be able to get these guys to do something they're not capable of doing in the middle of the season here. So it is what it is. This is a huge disappointment for Purdue. There's no getting around that. Graham Harrell did not work out, but a huge part of hiring Ryan Walters, an inexperienced head coach, was that he would get guys around him to help improve the operation, that he would have an offense that was capable, that he would have guys around him making the program better. This is a coordinator making $950,000 this year, by far the most in Purdue history. This was Ryan Walters trying to show that he didn't want to run the 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense that Illinois ran when he was there, that was effective that year. It worked. But this was Walters aiming for more. And for it to not work out, for it to kind of backfire, that's a tough one. Harrell was a big name who had a reputation with him, mostly because of his time as a quarterback at Texas Tech, when he led Texas Tech to like an 11-1 season back in 07, 08 maybe, Michael Crabtree game. This is, he had mixed results at USC and West Virginia, and I was willing to look past those because I didn't think the coaching staffs he was a part of were all that good. Clay Helton failed at USC and got fired. Neil Brown was trending in a poor direction at West Virginia when Purdue hired Graham Harrell. Now, West Virginia was better last year, but this year it doesn't look great. To be firing a coordinator 4 games into the season tells you how bad things are right now. Because unless I've missed it, this is the first Power 4 coordinator firing of the year. I could be wrong. Maybe there was another one out there, but it's not good when it's September 30th and you're announcing a new offensive coordinator. The month of September was a colossal disappointment for Purdue. Technically the Indiana State game was in August, so you go 0-3, you're non-competitive in those games, and you are entering October with an interim offensive coordinator, and you're likely to be favored in one more game the rest of the year tops. That's pretty dire. Purdue's tabbing Jason Simmons to call the plays. He was an analyst on staff, a longtime Indiana high school football coach at Hamilton Heights, Noblesville, and Ben Davis. Very well regarded in the Indiana high school football community. Very well regarded as a great dude. I've not heard a single bad thing about Jason Simmons in my time around, and I have known about him for much longer than just Monday when Ryan Walters announced this. He is the most experienced face on the offensive side of the ball. Who else would you have gone with? Corey Patterson, wide receivers coach, Lamar Kennard, running back coach, Marcus Johnson, offensive line. None of those guys have play calling experience. Another analyst, Stanton Keene, he was kind of Harrell's right-hand man. I don't know if you're firing Harrell that you promote his right-hand man to call the plays. This makes the most sense. It does. You can't go outside the program in the middle of the year because you're dealing with a candidate pool for your permanent offensive coordinator job that probably already has a job right now. And these guys aren't going to bail on their current teams mid-season to go take the Purdue job. That's not how this works. So to go out and get someone doesn't work. And I know I heard folks, go get Drew Brees. No, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. This is the way to do it. Walters said in his Monday press conference that if they didn't do anything, it felt like they were punting on the season. And while this isn't a move that's punting on the season, look, the facts are the facts here. The trajectory is the trajectory. You're not installing a ton of new stuff. You're not going to redesign the offense. You're keeping some continuity here, and you're hoping that some more eyes, a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective can make some minor improvements as you go to Wisconsin. And what better way to break in a new offensive coordinator, to really have some adversity strike, than before you're headed to Camp Randall Stadium, a program that Purdue has not beat since 2003. Purdue has lost 17 in a row in this series. This will be a noon kick on BTN, just like the old times. Purdue's a 2-touchdown underdog. This has been hovering around the 13 to 14 point range all week. It opened at 10.5 and quickly got bet up. After the money flooded the market on Purdue against Notre Dame and Oregon State, I don't see that happening. That's not going to happen here. I think the market is cooled on Purdue, as we've seen. In this streak, and I have the same podcast every year for this game. This streak is not only so troubling because it's been 20 years, but The average margin of defeat is almost 20 points per game. Purdue hasn't been close in a lot of these. 2004, 2018 were games that Purdue probably should have had. We all know what happened in 2004. Purdue blows a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter in 2018. This has been all Wisconsin for the last 20 years. But up in Madison, things aren't as pressing as Purdue's concerns, but it's not a thriving program right now. 7-6 in year one under Luke Fickell. Now a 2-2 start to this year. I don't think Badger fans are exactly thrilled with where they're at. Wisconsin did not look dominant in wins over Western Michigan or South Dakota to open up the season. And now they're coming off losses with Alabama and USC. They hung with both those teams. They led at halftime against USC before getting handled pretty comfortably. The offense hasn't taken off under Phil Longo. He's an air raid disciple guy. Purdue fans know all about how that works. It doesn't mean it's an actual air raid. Losing Tyler Van Dyke doesn't help. He was their starting quarterback, a transfer from Miami. Braden Locke played a little bit last year. He's the new quarterback. Again, mixed bag of results. He led a nice comeback win over Illinois last year, but he's only completed 50% of his passes, both on his career and this season. The run game is fine, but it's not a Ron Dane, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor Wisconsin run game. Ches Malusi's their lead back. You'll remember him from a gruesome injury at Purdue last season. He's been around forever up there. Kind of your classic COVID year guy that you can't believe he's still there. 155 yards per game on the ground. That's not classic Wisconsin. It's just not. It's a fine defense. It does some good things, but it's not overwhelmingly dominant the way some Wisconsin defenses in the past have been. Purdue hasn't shown the ability to take advantage of a average at best defense. It doesn't pack that punch, but it's still a team that wants to win through ball control, physicality, limit you, force you into mistakes, the way it's done really well. Wisconsin could really use a nice performance here in front of its home crowd to kind of settle some of the nerves. It's an 11 a.m. kick, so that student section will be very late arriving. I can promise you that. They'll be there in time to jump around, but I can't promise anything before that. Look, if Purdue had looked semi-okay in the last 3 games, I'd probably be sitting here picking a Purdue win. I don't think this is a very good Wisconsin team. I don't love what I've seen from them. I don't know what the future holds up there, but right now, it's not impressive. This is maybe a bowl team. Maybe. But Purdue's the 3rd most penalized team in the nation, or in the Power 4 maybe. Purdue's allowed 400-plus yards in 3 consecutive games. That hasn't happened since the end of 2019, when Purdue was throwing out a defense with a bunch of freshmen playing. Not good. Not good at all. I don't know that this is a game Purdue gets blown out of. If Purdue gets blown out, this is a huge problem. This will be a game where you get a good sense of what the locker room feels, because adversity is hit in every way you could imagine. The last 3 weeks have been really tough on the program. I think we'll get a feel for how much buy-in there still is in that locker room. I'm going to go 24-14 Wisconsin. It feels like it's going to be ugly. It feels like it's going to be just a game that no one outside of these 2 fan bases pays attention to. If you're Purdue, you hope you kind of get that 1-game bump from firing Graham Harrell and promoting Jason Simmons. You hope you get some enthusiasm there, that it gives you some juice, and that you can use that to put a scare in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's the team with a lot to lose here. Wisconsin's the 2-touchdown favorite at home. If you can take this thing close into the fourth quarter, who knows what happens. I'm not betting on Purdue to win. I'm not betting on Purdue at all, but I think 14 is a really big number. Purdue loses by more than 14. Oh boy, it's going to be another long week. After the break, I will answer your questions about Purdue football. This episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks. First question here, if Purdue upsets the Badgers, could this season be saved? Absolutely. Crazier things have happened. Again, this is not a particularly good Wisconsin team. I think a Purdue win here would pour a lot of water on the fire towards Ryan Walters. It would take a 1-11 catastrophe off the plate. It would maybe give you a little more optimism when you look down the schedule that Purdue could beat a Northwestern, maybe a Michigan State. Illinois and Indiana are bigger asks, but they're not elite rosters. Who knows? I wouldn't bet on that, but it would give you some optimism. It would make you feel a little better about where things are. It would be kind of damning for Graham Harrell, but Purdue has to stop getting blown out. I can't say this enough. That is what kills you. You can lose close, and no one's that upset. I mean, coming into the season, that's what I said would be the biggest barometer for Purdue's improvement this year. If it went 4-8 again, what do the 8 look like? Are they just getting blown out, or are they there in a lot of them? Right now, Purdue's getting blown out. It wasn't close last week, no matter what the scoreboard said for the first 3 quarters. You're onside kicking with 7 minutes to go at Oregon State. Purdue's got to stop getting blown out. Purdue's got to compete here. How do you recruit players if your team can't win football games? Do you expect the dominoes to keep falling with more decommits? Yeah, I think this was in response to LeBron Hill, a 3-star wide receiver from Hammond, Indiana, decommitting on Monday night. Look, anytime you fire a coordinator, this comes into play. Guys commit to coordinators and position coaches a lot, probably too frequently. That's been a part of the game for a long time. It happens, but not wise. If you're a young player listening, don't commit because of a coordinator or a position coach. Just look at those guys' track records. Look at how often they move. They're probably not going to be there for 5 years. But look, it's never easy to recruit to a staff with an uncertain future. Does it tank the 2025 class? The guys who are going to sign here in December? I don't know. Maybe. I doubt it. I think you'd see more of an impact on the 2026 class if Walters is back for year 3 and you're overcoming, if the season continues to go downhill, you have to overcome the, well, is he going to be there question. And that's a tough one. Semi-related, if Purdue loses every game for the rest of the season and still sits as one of the worst teams in the country, where does it go in the offseason? Does Ryan Walters get a third season, or does Purdue just move on? Sorry, I spaced out there. I don't love just sitting here speculating on job statuses. It's not fair. I would think that conversation takes place. If you're 1-11, I don't know what optimism there is about the future, and you need that. I mean, you have to have belief that it's heading in the right direction. Otherwise, you're just wasting time. And we'll see what things look like. It's October 2nd. Purdue's got 8 more games left. There's a lot of football left to be played, but I think those conversations have to happen, and I think those conversations have to be happening now. If things do trend in a really poor direction the rest of the year, I mean, you can't just be making the decision and starting the conversation on the morning after the Old Oak and Bucket game. These conversations are happening now, I would think. And I had a fascinating, albeit a sad one, from a longtime listener and friend. How much better is this team than the 1-11 Darrell Hazel team in 2013? which team had better starters? So I dug up a 2013 depth chart, and the roster was better than I remembered. Ricardo Allen and Frankie Williams, that's not a bad corner duo. That's more proven than what Purdue has right now. The offensive line was probably better than this one. Just with some of the names, Kevin Pamphel, Jordan Roos, Robert Kugler, not terrible. Not great, but not terrible. Ryan Russell was better than any rush end Purdue has right now. I think Landon Feichter got a shot in the NFL, though Dylan Thieneman's a better safety than Landon Feichter. The difference isn't as vast as I expected, but at the same time, Ryan Walters is a better coach than Darrell Hazel was. Hudson Card is an infinitely better quarterback than the Rob Henry, Danny Etling season. That wasn't good. Purdue's offense was horrible. It went 2 games without scoring. Like 2 games in a row without scoring, if I remember right. That was bad. This is a better team than that. But that 2013 team did have some players who weren't terrible. I had talked about doing a little basketball here. That got pushed off as the dismissal of Graham Harrell kind of takes top priority. That's big news. Again, that's rough. Everything going on right now is rough. Purdue has turned the calendar to October in the absolute worst place it could have been. We'll see what happens. We'll see what takes place, but I'll be here to break it down along the way. Be sure to follow on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Send in your questions there or at boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. We'll be back here after the game on Saturday. Record something Sunday morning. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, enjoy the game. Safe travels to anyone heading to Madison, and I will talk to you Sunday. Take care.